Check, check, check. Yes. Check in there. There you go. So I think we are 1 minute past. So I think it's time to go for it, yeah? Is recording? Good. So hello, everyone. Thank you a lot for being here. Actually, this is way more people than I expected, which is awesome. So yeah, let's have some fun together. That's my main goal here. So today we are going to explore ideas about how to update your team to be more extreme. But before going to the main topic, let me introduce myself. I am José María Valera Reales. I am from Spain, but everyone calls me Chema. So, and you can find me actually in the internet at Chema Class everywhere. Currently, I work as a tech lead at Lautsprecher Teufel, a company that produces high-quality headphones, speakers, and complete home cinemas at a really good price. And as a tech lead of the web development, the web shop system, my job is to make your buying experience as smooth as possible and help my team to get to the next level. In my free time, I like to work on open source, like FEL, which is a functional programming language, a dialect of Lisp, similar to Clojure, and fully compatible for PHP. To better understand what FEL is, you can think that Clojure is to Java what FEL is to PHP. So if you know PHP and you would like to go into the functional programming world, you can check this out. And then Gazella. Gazella is a library that helps you to split the logic of your application into different modules in a normalized way, inspired by Spryker. And I consider myself a fan of solid principles, as well as test-first and test-driven development, but especially agile values. And that's exactly what we will be talking about today. I want to have a closer look with you at how we work together in a team. What exactly agile means. Why is it often challenging to implement agile methods in your working environment? And most important of all, I want to discuss with you how we can create opportunities to foster agile methods in your team. As we will see in just a minute, feedback is very, very important part of Agile. So I hope to get your feedback and questions anytime something is unclear. And this talk should be as interactive as possible. And I will ask some questions in the middle, so you are super, super invited to contribute. So first of all, let's have a look at how a team usually works. To illustrate this, I found this diagram that shows the process of Agile. It all starts with an idea or customer request for a new feature or entirely new project. Yeah? So from this first abstract idea, the design team develops ideas to implement this new feature and defines the requirements that are the basis for us, the developers, and serve as a reference for building this new feature. Then we get to work. We build this new feature, we write code for sometimes weeks, even months, and we proudly hand over this to QA, right? And if we are lucky, this gets approved, and it gets released to production. Nice. But more often than not, QA will find something that is wrong. A small bug, a tiny piece that is missing, or in the worst case, a design flaw of the overall concept. And this means the whole process starts all over again. And this is often brought to us as an agile process, isn't it? But actually, this reminds me of something else. Wait a second. What's that? What's happened? Actually, that's not agile. That's waterfall. Right? This is the definition of waterfall. Do you remember? Waterfall is the old-fashioned method of working that everybody wanted to replace with agile approaches. So let's take a step back and remember why agile processes became so popular. See, many since many of us are still working with this waterfall, why is it considered outdated and sometimes even problematic? What's the problem with this, actually? So the process we are just looking at is very linear and sequential. You are right if you say that waterfall gives you a clear path to follow. However, if we go back to our previous example, it means that potential the same flows might only be detected very late in the process. This means that you might have to do weeks or even months of work all over again. And while I will say this is not an entire waste of time for you personally, since I'm sure you learn a lot from this, and setting up a new feature one more time will be faster, your company or your customer will probably not share this view entirely, because more money and time is needed to complete the feature. And then you get to production later. Not great for business, right? So I'm not trying to say that your code is not good. Yeah, let's consider you are writing good code. It's totally fine. But over the course of time, while you have been working on this code, your client changed their mind and now realize they actually need something different. A new technology just came out that you should consider in the design of your project. And waterfall is not very well equipped to deal with such changes. So we should keep in mind that the environment in which we work is constantly changing. Some of these changes we can control to a certain extent. Others come entirely unexpected and cannot be avoided, but still might impact our work. So this means that if we like it or not, change is going to happen. At first sight, this might seem to be a problem. You put time and effort into a task, and suddenly it becomes obsolete. So I want to make the case that the change itself is not the problem, but our inability to cope with change. Our team structures are often not designed to incorporate changes. But if we do that, seeing changes as opportunities, change is not necessarily a problem. It might be still challenging to cope with change, but can be an opportunity to improve your product, your team, and your own skills. So the big question now is, how can we make change less threatening? How can we make it easier to deal with change? I propose the five solutions. First of all, it's important to communicate. Talk to your team members frequently. Be in touch with your customer, your boss, other departments in your company. Most importantly, create an atmosphere that encourages open communication. This also means that regular feedback is important to build opportunities, to question your way forward, and to assess whether you are still on track toward achieving your goals as a team. What can or should be improved that our product still fit the requirements? If you find out that it doesn't, you can make necessary changes early in the process. And what will potentially become a huge task later on is much less scary if it just means a small adjustment early on. So active communication and feedback help simplifying the tasks or even the requirements, so you have to deal with less complexity over time. And this can only work if your team also has the courage to address upcoming challenges and is not afraid of speaking out. This refers back to my early point that it is important to create an open, encouraging atmosphere. But this, of course, only works if all team members support and respect each other. So these 5 ideas can help you to have an enriched personal life as well. They are basic, general ideas that help us to get better at what we do every day. But yes, they are still very abstract. Let's start having a look at how we can use these 5 ideas to guide us in designing team processes that make us better every day. As we have just seen, if we keep these 5 points in mind when designing a process about how our team should work together, it is much more likely that it will be easier to adapt to change. And as we have seen before, change is inevitable. And there are a large number of approaches that can help you to reflect and build better communication, feedback, simplicity, courage, and respect into your daily work routine. This, in turn, will also make your team not just more efficient, but also happier. We all want to feel proud of what we do. And if we help each other to improve and get better every day, we also help spark this feeling of pride and satisfaction. And this brings us much closer to the agile processes we are all looking to implement. But first of all, and now I would like to ask you, what comes to your mind when you hear the term agile? What is actually agile? What do you think? Any volunteer? Just a word or a sentence? Just set out. Fast feedback. Nice. More? Flexibility. Nice. More? Agile? Quality. Fast feedback, flexibility, quality. Nice. Okay, yeah, these are actually great answers, and yeah, they cover many aspects from Agile. So let's try to summarize and structure these ideas a little. I'm pretty sure some of you already heard about Scrum and Kanban, right? Nonetheless, they are not the only processes out there. As you can see in the picture, really funny actually, there are a lot of different approaches, and each of them, they might have their pros and cons, depending on very much on the situation of your team and project. What is important, however, is that you make sure that the process you design or follow is indeed agile and not just claiming to be. This happens quite often, that I've seen in the beginning, let's say, if you implement, let's say, a Scrum, just because Scrum says agile and because you have daily stand-ups from Scrum, it doesn't mean you are agile. So if we start at the abstract level, the Agile Manifesto from 2001, 20 years ago, more than 20 years ago, wow, defines the following priorities. Individuals and interaction are more important than the processes and tools that you use. For example, before writing lengthy document to explain something, call your colleagues. Explain your request or suggestion. This will give you the chance to hear their feedback, explain your motivation, and keep people actively in the loop of what is going on. This helps to increase transparency, but also helps you to learn about potential challenges early. Secondly, if you prioritize good and clean code that is ideally self-explanatory and easy to follow, you might not even need additional documentation at all because the code is the documentation. Similarly, frequent interaction with your customers increases transparency and efficiency. While it is important to define a frame of your task when negotiating a contract, and it's important to set boundaries, yes, it's equally important to leave room for adaptations. What they wanted 1 year ago might be different from what they need now. And at least for me, a key aspect of agile processes is the emphasis of making your team ready to cope with change, rather than being trained to strictly follow a plan no matter what. And all of this should be considered when choosing an agile approach for your team. They are still, quite abstract ideas. So let's have a look at how we can translate this into practice. And so I personally find extreme programming very helpful for this. The next one, just raise your hand if you have heard about extreme programming before. Awesome. Nice. So for those that didn't, let's do some recap. Actually, extreme programming is just this. Basically, it's a compilation of solutions based on values, principles, and practices as an agile process. And together we can imagine this as a bridge. On this side, on the left side, we have the abstract world of values. The ideal, let's say, the ideal world. On the other side of the river, we have the practices, the things that we do in our daily job. And the abstract world and the concrete world are connected with the principles that are kind of a motivation to go from one side to another. So let's start with the core-driven values of extreme programming. Actually, these are not new. We know this. We learn about this as being the solution to breaking the habit of working together in a waterfall process. So they are, one more time, communication, feedback, simplicity, courage, and respect. All right. So if we'll take a look at the other side of the river, the real-world options, how to make these values a reality in your team. You have plenty of options to choose from. You can encourage your team to do pair programming, create room for sitting together and discuss code while you are writing, implement test-first programming, and many, many more practices. However, it might be not entirely obvious for your whole team or your boss why you should put an effort in changing the way you work already, right? You work together. Why you need to change that? Why should anyone set aside extra time for sitting together? Isn't it enough to test your final product instead of testing all the time? Why should you follow an incremental design approach? Just for the sake of achieving those values? So you might say that this is, of course, a value in itself, but you might need a few more arguments to convince others. And that's where the principles come in. The principles of extreme programming bridge the abstract world of values and the real world of practices. There are many different principles which I don't have time to go through today, but most of them can be considered a kind of motivation of implementing those practices and considering these values in your work. In my opinion, mutual benefit is the most important principles because it's about finding practices that benefit us now, us later, and the customer as well. For example, write a test first. Help us now with the design of the code. Help us later ensuring the system doesn't break. And the customer guaranteeing the feature works as expected. Other principles include diversity of ideas. Don't be afraid of failure. Look at everything you do as an opportunity for learning, avoiding big steps because they have a high risk of failure, and aiming for high-quality systems because they are more predictable and easier to change, and many more. This principle shows that applying extreme programming approaches in your team can have a profound positive impact on the quality of your work and thereby, ultimately, also improve business. Shouldn't that be an incentive enough to change the way we work? For many, becoming more agile is the ultimate goal, but why don't we all work like this already? Why is it so hard? So we all know that we have our team's routines and dynamics that are not always easy to change, anyway. But when we have to finalize a product on time or get that bug fixed as soon as possible in production, or is it not, it's not always easy to find time to reflect and actively ensure you follow the new routine you plan to implement. So let's start tomorrow, you might think, when things are less threatening. But are they ever really? Is it not surprising that extreme programming gets lost in the stress of daily business? The production environment has priority over developing your team, which is understandable and appears to be the right thing to do in the short run. But is it really in the best, in the long run? This often goes hand in hand with a lack of learning opportunities, which often do not have a place in our daily routines and processes. So I argue that creating learning opportunities on a routine basis is key if you want to help your team to be able to cope with change better. And as we have seen in the very beginning, it is inevitable that your team will have to deal with change eventually. So my suggestion is to schedule some regular time slots for improving your team. This should not be easily be skipped because you are behind schedule for a project, but should be considered equally important to improve and motivate your team. Of course, it's up to you how often you schedule this, and it depends on the time and resources you have available. But I would recommend to have them like once or twice per month to have a meaningful impact. I want to introduce you. This is there. Yeah, it's good. I want to introduce you code, katas, and Untitled Talks. Who knows what is a software kata? Wow, not that many. So now you will know from today on. A term kata comes from the repetitive movements done in karate that help you to improve your fighting skills. Why? Why code katas? Because as a group, we don't practice enough. Most of our learnings take place on the job. So most of our mistakes get made there as well. And because we don't want to break production, we are reluctant to try new things. So katas exist to help developers get the same benefits as practicing in any other profession. They are simple artificial exercises that let you experiment and learn without the pressure of production. There are no right or wrong answers in any software kata. The benefit comes from the process, not the result. There are 1,000 katas. There are many katas. There are katas to improve your refactoring skills. For example, Gilder Rose refactoring kata by Emily Beach, or to improve your testing skills, like easy, like Fizzbuzz or Roman numerals, or more advanced, like Bank kata from Sandor Mancuso to practice outside-in TVD, for example. Also to get more confident when programming with other people watching. Improving your pair programming. Also improving this pair programming driven navigator role switching. Are you always writing? Are you always watching? Let's try it out, change this. Let's try switch the role. Pair programming is great for mentoring, for example, seniors to junior, but also seniors with seniors. Because, okay, they are senior, fine, but they don't know everything, and they can learn from each other. They have different way of working, and they can together get to a understanding. And of course, it's possible to do katas alone. Indeed, my open source project that I mentioned in the very beginning are constant katas for me, are a place where I explore new ideas and I try to improve and get better with the language and play around. But also, it's even better to do it with other people, because when you do it in pairs, you can see that the team does not only learn, but everyone has fun, and that's equally as important. So this is something that we do at TOEFL since more than a year, and we can clearly see the benefits. On the other hand, Tech Talks, this is what I'm doing right now, this is what's happening in the conference. Imagine this internally in your team, in your company, in working time. You just need to block, like, let's say, half an hour. In 1 month, half an hour, max, or 20 minutes, and then talk about things related, knowledge related to the tech industry with your peers. They can help introducing new concept in your team, but also help the team to feel more comfortable with introducing their ideas, knowledge, and opinions. They experience that their knowledge is valued and seen. So this, for example, is a blog post I wrote 3 years ago with some tips about how to improve your Tech Talks or any presentation, if you want to get deeper into this. Another thing I forgot to mention is that actually I like to read a lot. Because there's a reason, because reading brings you somehow a lot of other people's experiences, knowledge, and ideas concentrating in a few hours book. And so I would like to share some of the books that are highly related to this topic. Extreme Programming Explained is the foundation of this talk, as you can guess. I highly recommend this book to get deeper into these values, principles, and practices that we talk today. Who Moved My Cheese? This is one of my favorites. This is a pretty short book, less than 100 pages, super simple English. It's a tale with a metaphor of the different attitudes that people adopt as part of their identity in life when they have to confront any change. Clean Agile, written by one of the founding fathers of Agile, Uncle Bob, and the author of the Clean series. And Peopleware. This states that soft skills are more important in IT than people tend to think, because software development is about people and their interactions. And lastly, the Pragmatic Programmer addresses the basic foundation of pragmatism in our software industry. If you have read this and you want to talk about this, you can ping me. I love these books, so we can talk about this anytime. And I'm pretty active on Twitter, even more in GitHub. And you can find more about me in my personal website, where I share monthly posts about these topics and also share my readings every month. And I will gladly answer any question you might have, and I would love to hear your feedback now or later. Thank you very much.